It begins in the dark, not just the dark of night, but a deeper shadow, the kind that lingers in places untouched by time or light. In the dense rainforest of West Africa, long before borders and flags, before concrete cities and electric light, the jungle ruled. And in that jungle, something else ruled too. Something older than empire, older than law, something whispered about, feared by all, but truly known by none. They were men, and yet not entirely men. They moved with the silence of predators. They killed not out of rage, but with ceremony. And when they struck, the signs were unmistakable. A body left mangled, claw marks, deliberate, precise. Leopard tracks, impossibly large, impossibly human. They were called Leopard Men, and they belonged to the Leopard Society, perhaps the most feared and secretive cult in African history. And if you think this is merely folklore, a tale to frighten children, then you haven't seen what they left behind. For over a century, colonial officers, missionaries, and local chiefs documented the aftermath of these so-called animal attacks. Victims had their throats ripped out, organs removed, bones crushed as though by jaws of steel. Yet no leopard could be caught, no animal could be blamed. Because these weren't animal attacks, they were executions carried out by men wearing leopard skins, men with metal claws strapped to their fingers, men who believed they weren't just copying the leopard, they were leopard. The Leopard Society was no might. The Leopard Society was no might. It was a brotherhood that operated in the shadows of tribal politics, ancient religion, and colonial resistance. To understand it, you must leave behind the modern world. You must walk back into the jungle, back to a time when law was sacred and punishment was divine, because the Leopard Men didn't kill for pleasure. They killed for balance, for justice, their justice. They believed the spirits of their ancestors washed through failing eyes, that the blood of the innocent could cleanse the village, that to become a beast was to become free. Initiation into the Leopard Society was not just a rite of passage, it was a transformation. Members underwent sacred rituals in the depths of the forest, rituals designed to kill the human within and awaken the beast. They fasted for days, they were drugged with powerful herbs, they were shown the tools of death: iron claws, sharpened jawed bones, blood-soaked robes. They swore never to speak of what they saw, and then they killed. These societies were not disorganized cults. They had structure, leadership, rituals passed down for generations. In many villages, they were the true law, dealing punishments when the courts could not. To betray the society was to invite death, to oppose it was to vanish. And so many people learned to look away, to pretend that the claw marks on the sheep's hut were from a white cat, to pretend that the child who disappeared was taken by spirits, because to admit the truth, that your neighbors, your relatives, your leaders could become predators at night. That was the truth too heavy to bear. You must understand the Leopard Society wasn't madness. It was order, brutal, yes, but in a world where traditional justice was being erased by colonial rule, these societies filled the void. They became both sword and shield. But what happens when justice becomes obsession? When the line between protector and predator disappears? That is when the killings became more than just punishment. That is when the Leopard Society crossed into something far darker. Tales began to spread of victims choosing not for crimes, but for power of cannibal rituals, meant to absorb the strength of the slain, of spirits summoned through flesh and blood. And that is when the colonial world took notice. Authorities tried to intervene. They sent soldiers, they arrested dozens, they held public trials to scare the people into submission. But for every leopard man caught, two more vanished into the jungle, because the society didn't need walls or temples. It needed only belief and fear. Even today, in remote villages, the name is whispered. old men speak of justice carried out in silence, of claw marks on doorposts, of footprints that begin but do not end. Because to many, the Leopard Society never truly died. It simply went deeper underground, waiting, watching, and when the balance tips again, the leopard walks. Welcome to the hunt. Welcome to Folklore Frontier, where legends breathe and fear never sleeps. Subscribe to Folklore Frontier, where legends breathe and fear never sleeps. To understand the Leopard Society, we must go back, not decades, not centuries, but into the very heart of Africa's ancient soul, before the first colonizer ever set foot on its soil. Here, the justice was not handed down from distant thrones. It was sacred, personal, administered by elders, diviners, and sometimes by shadows. In many West African cultures, secret society held immense power. They preserved oral history, taught survival, and above all, they maintained order. You see, in the absence of written laws, this society were the law. Their symbols were feared, their walls unquestioned, and their punishment legendary. Among them, the Leopard Society stood apart, clothed not in robes but in animal skin and silence. But this wasn't mere symbolism. The leopard in African cosmology was the perfect predator, graceful, ruthless, unseen. To channel the leopard was to invoke the power of the forest itself. To become a leopard man was to transcend humanity. Initiates were chosen carefully. Warriors, hunters, sometimes spiritual men. They were taken deep into the bush, far from village eyes, and there they underwent the breaking. Their identity was stripped away. They were given new names, new scars, and new oaths. They were shown how to move like leopards, how to kill like leopards. These initiations were not just physical, they were spiritual. The society blended animism, ancestral worship, and warrior tradition into something terrifyingly effective. Many believed the leopard spirit lived within them. Some even claimed to undergo shape-shifting, not of the body but of the soul. At night, they patrolled, they enforced tribal laws in ways outsiders could never understand. A man who stole from the village granary might vanish in his sleep. A woman accused of witchcraft might be found with her throat torn out. To the villagers, these were not crimes, they were corrections. The leopard punished what the chief could not. When the spirits were angry, it was the society who listened. The Leopard Society spread across the forest belt of West Africa, adapting to the customs of each region, but always retaining its core: secrecy, power, and fear. In Sierra Leone, they were known as Anyoto. In Nigeria, among the Ekoi and Ibibio, they were linked to Ekpe societies. In the Congo, their legends merged with the tales of cannibal kings and forest spirits, and then everything changed. Europeans came, colonial powers, ignorant of the delicate spiritual balance, dismantled traditional systems, and imposed foreign rule. Chiefs were overthrown, rituals banned, tribal justice was labeled savagery. The Leopard Society became outlawed. But secret things do not die so easily. They retreat, they adapt, they become darker. Stripped of open authority, the Leopard Society turned fully underground. What was once justice became vengeance, and in the shadows of colonial rule, the Leopard Men sharpened their claws and prepared to strike. The jungle does not forget, nor does it forgive. And when the Leopard Society moved into the shadows, it didn't wither, it evolved. Without the constraints of tribal order, it shed its skin. What remained was something darker, predatory, pure. This was no longer justice, this was hunting. In the dead of the night, villagers would hear the call, not quite human, not quite animal. A heavy breath, a groan, sometimes a scream. And then a body would be found, torn apart, ribs shattered open, organs missing, sometimes limbs partially consumed. The tracks left behind were always the same: leopard prints, impossibly large, sometimes walking upright. The victim's liver had been removed with surgical precision. Leopard claws found beside the body. No wild animal could be responsible. But these were not animals, they were men. Men who had been trained, conditioned to kill like beasts, to think like leopards, and more disturbingly, to eat like them. They believe if you eat a man's heart, you steal his courage. If you drink his blood, you take his power. Cannibalism, the darkest taboo, was not mindless savagery here. It was ritual, a sacred art, a sacrifice. The Leopard Society believed that through the consumption of human flesh, they could become something more than human, stronger, faster, untouchable. These were not isolated incidents from the 1880s. Through the 1940s, reports of ritual killings tied to the Leopard Society emerged across West Africa, in Liberia, in Nigeria, in Sierra Leone, and the methods were shamefully consistent. Victims were stalked for days, chosen carefully. They were often seen as lawbreakers, outsiders, or political threats. Then at the moment of attack, the Leopard Men struck with precision. Claws lashed out, slashing arteries. Jawbone knives tore into bellies. Sometimes the victims were still alive when the ritual began. The blood was collected, the flesh consumed in silence, the remains left as a message. The leopard has passed through. But this wasn't just about power, it was spiritual. The society believed the leopard was a divine messenger, that its hunger mirrored the hunger of the ancestors. By feeding it, they fed the spirit world. By killing it, they brought balance. In some regions, the leopard priests would conduct ceremonies before each kill, asking permission from the ancestors, offering tobacco, kola nuts, or blood. Only after this could the hunt begin, and once complete, the blood ritual sealed the transformation. A man became a leopard, not in body, but in essence. To an outsider, it looked like madness. To the members, it was purity. The Leopard Society didn't believe they were committing crimes. They believed they were preserving the old ways, defending their people from corruption, weakness, and foreign disease. But eventually, the horror grew too loud to ignore. The colonial powers, once dismissive, now faced pressure from abroad. Europe demanded answers. Missionaries cried out for salvation, and slowly, methodically, the hunt turned against the Leopard Men. Entire communities were raided, witch doctors arrested, sacred groves burned. Trials were held, often in foreign courts that couldn't pronounce the names of the accused, let alone understand their motives. But one trial changed everything. In 1946, British authorities captured and tried several members of the Leopard Society for a string of ritual killings. The trial was a sensation. For the first time, the Western world stared into the eyes of men who believed they were divine predators, and they didn't flinch. They described the rituals, the purpose, the righteousness of the acts. They were not ashamed, they were devout. Several were hanged, others imprisoned. The British declared victory, but the villagers knew better, because fear doesn't end with the trial. And in the jungles, where shadows still move in silence, the leopard walks. The killing stopped publicly, but even today whispers remain. Disappearance, symbols carved into trees, bodies too mutilated for animals to blame, because the Leopard Society may be gone, or it may simply be watching, waiting for the world to forget, so it can rise again. By the late 1940s, fear gripped West Africa, not from the Leopard Society itself, but from what it represented. A secret justice system other than empire, a court that defied written law with sharpened claws and ritual fire, and worst of all, a force the British, French, and Belgians could not control. What began as folklore had become open defiance. The Leopard Society was no longer whispered might, it was now a colonial crisis. Dictionary described entire regions held hostage by devil worshippers. Police found bodies that no animal could explain, and governments feared what they could not see, a network of healers who vanished into the trees. So they responded the only way they knew how, with brute force. Entire villages were raised under suspicion of harboring Leopard Men. Priests and elders were detained without trial. Drums and masks were seized. Secret groups, some thousands of years ago, were burned in the name of progress. But violence only fueled legend. The more the colonizers tried to cross the cord, the more exclusive it became. Each execution created new martyrs. Each burned shrine bettered deeper silence. To the Leopard Society, colonialism wasn't justice, it was blasphemy. They believed their ancestors had given them the right to judge, to kill, to balance the world through fear. What the Europeans called murder, they called tradition. What the world called terror, they called ritual. The infamous man leopard trials of Sierra Leone in 1946 became a moment of reckoning. The accused did not plead for mercy. They gave no apologies. They confessed not as criminals, but as priests of justice. One man, when asked why he participated in the killings, replied, "Because the leopard eats what is rotten. We cleanse the village." These weren't empty walls. They were ideology, and they terrified the Western world. Several men were executed, others vanished. The British declared the Leopard Society destroyed, but only above ground, because in the forest, beneath the trees, behind the drums and whispers, the legend endured. Today, the Leopard Society is said to be gone, its clothes rusted, its shrines abandoned, its rituals silenced, but is it? Even now, villagers in parts of Liberia, Sierra Leone, and the Congo whispered about strange deaths, about missing children, about justice served in silence. Police sometimes find claw marks on bodies or blood smeared on trees, but no wild animal is ever caught. They don't wear leopard skins anymore, but they are still watching. When things go too far, they act. Some believe the Leopard Society adapted, that it became political, shifting into militias, cult gangs, or underground enforcers. Others believe it became spiritual, more ghosts than group, an ancestral warning made flesh. But one thing is certain, the fear remains. The Leopard Society may have begun as justice, it may have become terror, but above all, it was a reminder of what happens when law, belief, and survival become one. It asks a silly question: who gets to decide right from wrong when the gods are silent? The leopard answered, with blood. This is not just an African story, it is a human story. Every society has its secret shadows, its symbols of fear, its rituals cloaked as law, whether it is witches, inquisitions, cults, or courts. We all build monsters to carry out the things we are afraid to face. Every society has its secret shadows, its symbols of fear, its rituals clothed as law, whether it is witches, inquisitions, cults, or courts. We all build monsters to carry out the things we are too afraid to face. The Leopard Society didn't emerge from madness. It was born from grief, from injustice, from belief. And that makes it all the more terrifying. Because maybe the real horror isn't that men became leopards, but that under the right marks, the right might, any of us could. If you have made it this far, then you already know. History isn't just facts, it is fear, folklore, and the things we bury. If stories like this haunt you, if you want more of the shadows history tries to erase, then don't just watch. Subscribe to Folklore Frontier, where legends breathe and fear never sleeps.